Right, it's gone 7, so I'll make a start. So, good evening to our visitors. Thank you for joining us. My name is Michael and I'm the workshop coordinator for Reading Town Meal. Reading Town Meal was first held in 2011, and these fantastic picnics in the park celebrate the delicious fruit and veg that is grown in Reading. All the food is donated by the wonderful growers and allotment holders around Reading, cooked by Reading College catering students and served free in Thornbury Gardens, which this year is on this coming Saturday afternoon. The meal is accompanied by music from local bands, family fun activities, plus the chance to learn about growing your own food, shopping with local producers, and finding out what local community and sustainability groups are doing in Reading. This year, Reading Town Meal is coordinating Reading with Reading Climate Festival, and both are part of the Great Big Green Week. Due to the pandemic last year, there was no event itself. However, we ran some workshops as webinars instead of live in Thornbury Gardens, where Reading Town Meal is usually held. Given their success last year, this year we have set up 4 webinars, as you can see on the screen. So on the second one, and for more details, please see the Reading Town Meal website for more information. So we are recording this webinar, and in due course it will be uploaded to the Reading Town Meal YouTube channel, where you can also find last year's workshops. So there'll be about a 45-minute presentation followed by question and answers. And if you have any questions, please use the chat function. So as you see, this evening's talk is Reading's Climate Action Plan 2020 to 25 achievements so far, and how can you help? So I would like to welcome Tony, Chris, Malcolm and Trish from Reading Climate Action Network. The Reading Climate Action Plan was developed jointly by the council, businesses, the community, the university, and agencies and services such as the Environment Agency, Thames Water, and gas and electricity suppliers. The different actions cover water, energy, resources, nature, transport, and health, were developed to help Reading achieve carbon net zero by 2030. COVID has had an impact, particularly on the health actions, but actions are taking place. This webinar is a taster looking at some of the activities taking place. However, please look out for a more detailed annual report later in the year. We're starting with Tony Cowling, one of the principal actors in the development of Reading Hydro. So stop the screen share. So I'll hand over.
Yeah, I'm the one unmuted now, so welcome everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about Reading Hydro, and Michael's going to be doing my slides. So we go to the next one straight away, Community Benefit Society. The ideas for Reading Hydro were kicked around in the green groups and eventually launched as the Reading Sustainability Centre from Greater Reading Environmental Network in 2014. And this became a community interest company in 2015. And Reading Hydro itself formed in 2017. Go for the next slide, please. Yeah, so Reading Hydro were able to obtain grants from the government through the Urban Community Energy Fund 20,000, and we obtained Environment Agency licenses with that money, although we weren't really supposed to. We kind of swapped some public engagement with some permissions work. So we did the public engagement free and used the money for the licenses. This was agreed before we got the grant. We had to do a planning permission application, and that was approved. But the remarkable thing was we had to do a sequential test, which meant we had to check whether we could build the hydro somewhere other than in the river floodplain. which would seem quite a bit of a remarkable thing to be asked to do. So can we build it halfway up the side of the valley? No, we couldn't. And so they were happy with that. Ofgem approval we got, and we did a lot of ecology and heritage surveys and reports on the site, probably maybe £10,000 worth. And so the Reading Sustainability Centre helped a lot. Go for the next slide. And once we had some permissions in place, we decided that we needed to have some serious money to do detailed design and to move the project forward. So we ran something called a pioneer share offer, and some lovely people in Reading invested something like £15,000 in the project with no chance of getting their money back, or possibility of no chance of getting their money back. And that was matched by some government funding, bounce back funding or something. And we had several small grants from small local organisations as well, which helped us to go along. We appointed a design consultant, and that really got the ball rolling because they started working on design and going towards a tender process. Next one, we might get a photograph soon. We then, once we had that tender, we went to a public share offer, and that's a graph of how the share offer filled. Our shares sold really, really well, and everything came back higher than intended. The second share offer that we did, we needed some extra money. It filled in 3.5 days. And I said to them, let's close it. And they said, no, we'll leave it open till Friday, by which time it was £50,000 oversubscribed. We had to give some money back. Next slide, please. We got tremendous local support for it. So next thing is procurement. Try and find a contractor using a tender process, and the volunteers in Reading Hydro were clearing the site and creating a site compound, obtaining footpath closures, and we ordered the screws and control package at that point as well. Once we had money in the bank, we needed to order stuff because there's a very long lead time on Archimedes screws and the stuff. We appointed the civil works and the main contractor, and everything went ahead. You've probably seen it down there, building by the river. Next one. Really difficult to place concrete in a river. You need to kind of dig a hole in water. So you basically put a cofferdam around the outside of it and then start digging in the bottom of that. The river flooded twice during construction, causing delays and a bit of work. We did finish slightly behind schedule with the civil works in February 2021, February this year. Go for the next one. Hope we get a photograph soon. I'll put some photographs in. Yeah, these are our contractors laying concrete. It's incredibly difficult to lay concrete on a slope, but they seem to do it without any difficulty at all. The big yellow beam across the middle is holding the cofferdam up so it doesn't crush in, and they can eventually remove those once that concrete's set. On the far side, you can see the reinforcing rods that haven't got concrete in them yet. Later that day, they filled them in with concrete. The left-hand side of the picture, you can see some funny kind of trapezoidal shaped, triangular shaped bits. Those are the bottom-bearing plinths, not yet concreted. And there's a wall down the middle that divides the two channels. Next slide, please. So we put a connection cable between Reading Hydro and Thames Lido. The cable cost £12,000, weighed 2 tons, and had to go under the river using something called horizontal directional drilling, which is quite clever. You drill a hole and pull a pipe through it, and then pull your cable through that. And on one Saturday, we had 60 volunteers out helping pull that cable around on the site and bury it in the trench that you can see them digging there. It was a little bit more difficult because although we were way outside of the root protection zone of the tree, you can see a root in the bottom of that trench, which was actually following an old service trench, and we had to get the cable underneath 5 of those in that trench. We didn't damage any roots at all. There seemed to just be big roots, but no little ones, which was a bit weird. So we had a fantastic Saturday. I really loved that day. Next one, please. Had a pontoon across the river to help us get these Archimedes screws across the mill leat, and then we had a big crane to put them in. That crane's lifting them in. It was a very clever crane because it could lift them in horizontally and then tilt them down to the 22 degrees angle which they sat in. Once they were put in and fixed, then Reading Hydro had to grout the underneath of the screw channels. The 2 quotes of £20,000 and £25,000 were doing that. And I couldn't face it. I said, I'm not having that. We were going to do it ourselves. And it actually cost £1,800 in the end. So I think I should go back to being a concreter. The electrical and mechanical equipment was installed in the following 3 weeks, and the thing's all been run up to power and is working. Go for the next one. we had fun with the turbine house. If you haven't been down there to look at it yet, you should go down and look at this mural. This is a photograph on our website, so you don't need to take a photograph. And it's also got the railings missing, which make it slightly easier to see. I love the little man skipping. He's my favorite. And it says, this energy is by the people, for the people. Next one. So the paybacks, investors get interest and their investment back over the life of the project, probably 20 or 25 years. Reading gets green energy. Local organisations can bid after a couple of years for funding from our community grants pot, which will mainly be given to kind of green and eco stuff. And then at the end of the period, once everybody's been paid back, the local community will own the asset and the income from it. It can't be sold for the benefit of the directors or anything like that. So it's a really nice asset to have. It's a kind of lovely legacy, and it will continue to fund all sorts of nice things for a long time into the future. So I love it that it produces something out of nothing. Next one could be the last one. Yeah, that was the last one. Yeah, thank you. He's going to do questions at the end. And I stayed on time. I'm finished.
Well done. Cheers, Tony. Yeah, okay, well, follow that one. The hydropower scheme is an amazing achievement. So, yeah, congratulations, Tony, and all of the team. It's really cool. I'm going to, my name's Chris Beals. I've worked in the water and climate sector for about 20 years, former chair of the Climate Change Partnership. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about climate change, the Climate Action Network, and the theme that I'm involved in most, which is the water theme. So, Michael, if you move on to the next one. So I give a little bit of a bit of climate change news. I mean, during the COVID crisis, it's been it's been difficult to keep an eye on what's been going on. I thought it was quite busy this year. Just on reflection, 2020 was the second hottest year in a record that goes back to 1880. This summer has had a lot of extreme events, and there's a few of them on here. We've had over 50 hurricanes, cyclones, and extratropical storms, including Ida that hit Louisiana and New York City, Typhoon Infar, and I think you see a picture of that in the top left, which caused record flooding in China, killed 300, relocated 1 million people. There was a river flooding, which was made 9 times more likely by climate change in Germany and Belgium. There's a picture of that in the bottom center. And then a lot of heat around the world as well. Pacific Northwest recording 46.6 degrees, which is figured to be impossible without climate change. 1,000 deaths as a result of those kind of heats. 48 degrees Celsius in Siberia. Deadly heat in the Middle East. For us, it's probably relatively calm heat-wise, but we did in this country, County Armagh got recorded 31 degrees, which was a record, and wildfires around Siberia. I noticed that some of the Mediterranean countries are trying to organise something to kickstart their climate action as well recently in the news, and drought in many places as well. So lots going on around the world. July itself was recorded as the hottest July on record. So if you move forward to the next, Michael, yeah, all of that's happening with temperatures where they are at the moment. This graph that you're looking at here is for England, actually. It's a very impressive time series. It goes all the way back to the Great Fire of London 350 years ago. But similar to the global picture, it's about 1 degree warmer in the England area, as similar as it is around the world. And you can see going forward the choices that we've got with the how we behave as a human race, and whether we manage to tackle the emissions that we've got. So putting lots of schemes in place, like Tony's hydropower scheme, and trying to line up to the Paris climate change targets would follow something like that blue line that you've got there. That's a 2 degree increase in global temperatures, but we could very well follow something like the red line, which is letting the emissions all hang out. But one of the things to think about is just how much extreme weather we've had before we, really even get started with climate change. So there's lots to play for, lots of big choices. We've got COP26 coming up. So if you move on to the next one, Michael, which is the next big conference of the parties, opportunity for the countries of the world to get together and make some serious climate change pledges. I picked that that image on the right hand side out of the material that they've got online for COP26, just to come up with something that's a little bit more impressive than Tony's Archimedes screw. You can see one of the massive offshore wind turbines that we've got. UK's put a lot on over the last decade or so, and we're generating a lot of electricity through that. But we've only got to think about the gas crisis that's happening at the moment, and there's big questions about how we move forward from that. We've got to bring emissions down globally massively. On the left-hand side, I've got a graph there of zero carbon Reading. This is something that's written into the new climate emergency strategy for the town. The aim for the town of reaching net zero by 2030. The town's already cut emissions by a half in the period from 2005, but obviously that's the easier bit. We've got the harder bit to go. The theme itself, since the strategy was launched last year, has made some good progress, particularly building good networks with SSTN, our energy networks provider. A few planning successes as well, but one of the key things they're constrained by is some of the government criteria, particularly around retrofits. So lots to do, but you can see the scale of the challenge as we try to zero our emissions in only another 8 years. So if you shift forward, Michael, we've got a couple of slides from the climate emergency strategy. It's all online at readingcam.org.uk, so you can see it there. As Michael said, there's 6 main themes in the strategy. We've got energy and low carbon, which I mentioned. Trish is going to be talking to you about various things going on with the nature theme. Just say about transport, there's been a focus there on active travel. That's you may have seen things popping up around the town around that. We have a resources theme, which Paul's leading. Big focus there is on at the moment food waste to tie in with the new food waste recycling that's going on, composting, and a big focus on explaining why people need to reduce waste in the first place, which obviously gets it out of the system. They've got a newsletter, really pleased about the way that Plastic Free Caversham has been doing, and their big aim is to turn the town into a zero waste town. 5th theme we've got is health. Obviously, COVID's been had a massive impact on the health theme, so not a lot of progress there. But the final theme I'd mention is water, which is a theme that I'm close to. So the aim for our theme is to guide Reading towards being the most water aware and water efficient town in the country. So big aims there. And Michael, if you shift forward, I'll just give a couple of pointers about water. So just to get things in perspective, you can see there on the left-hand side is a sort of school geography project catchment map with a river and the water flowing down the hill. It's one of the things to note, of course. Our water that flows through Reading is, we need to make sure that we influence upstream to make sure that there's enough water in that river, and also to try and do anything we can to alleviate the flooding by influencing upstream as well. Most of the water that goes into our water supply comes from the River Kennet, about 80%. So that's the real focus on the water supply side of things. Probably on the flood side of things, our other main river is the River Thames, and that's one that we probably worry about most when it comes to the flooding risk for most of the properties in the town. So we are lucky where we live in this part of the country. The Kennet catchment is a chalk catchment. It's got a good natural aquifer, which means that we're a lot more resilient to water shortages than we would be. But having said that, particularly with climate change making the summers that we're expecting in the future to be potentially a lot hotter, we need to prepare for bigger droughts. And of course, we've got a lot of growth going on in the town as well, so a lot more potentially thirsty mouths. So if you flick forward, Michael, yes, saving water is going to be a really important thing for us in the town. Happily, we don't need to go to zero water, but we do need to reduce our consumption. So a lot of our activity in a theme group is going to be around engaging people, businesses, trying to get the message out that we do need to save water, giving people advice and ideas about how they can save, with Thames Water particularly able to offer advice for things to install to reduce your consumption and advice on how to do it. Longer term, we're hoping to influence planning so that we can try and make sure that those new builds that we're expecting in the town, I think it's something like about 20% growth over 20 years, that kind of thing. So it's a lot. Trying to make sure that they're water neutral. So as the new builds come in, water is saved in existing properties. So a lot to do there. And if you slip forward, Michael, similar on the flooding side, we are at risk. There are hundreds, many hundreds of properties and businesses at risk from flooding. You can see on the right-hand side a aerial shot from the last major flood that we had, which was in not 1974, 1947, in the spring of 1947, when there was a big snowmelt flood there. There's a lot that we need to do in terms of getting people informed about the risk and how to get prepared. There's also, we need to think as a town as well about, there's an opportunity that we have about building some defences in Caversham and Reading. What do we want to do with that? And bigger than that, there's a big project that I've become involved with within the Environment Agency called the Thames Valley Flood Scheme, which is looking at the whole Thames Valley and how to reduce the amount of water in the river in the first place. So just a little plug there. There's an animation that we put together trying to help explain how climate change leads to bigger floods in the future. So do follow that link. So the consultation on the flood scheme's finished, but all the materials up there, including a lot of history about flooding and other bits and pieces. So do check that out. And if you go to the next slide, please. That's my final slide. This is a good image that I think came out probably last year. Well, it must have been last year. It's a good starting slide for a presentation, but I'm using it at the end. That first wave there, COVID-19, it's dominated the news, dominated our lives for the last 16 or so months, whatever it is. It's massively slowed down, as Michael said in his introduction, the work for the Reading Climate Action Network. So, a lot of the themes have been delayed in what we were wanting to get done, particularly I know my theme as well, the water theme. So we need patience. We need to get through this COVID wave because it's not over yet. I can expect a bit of a rocky ride as we go through the autumn and winter months. But we will get through that, and hopefully come out of the other side, pick up the energy, and get on the case with our action plans. Brexit's there. I want to talk about that. it will change the opportunities and geopolitical positioning of the UK. So it does have an effect on that even bigger and the biggest wave, climate change. That's something that, as I mentioned in the beginning, with all those extreme events we've had in the summer, is already coming through the COVID news and all the other news that's going on in the politics and everything like that that's in the world. It's going to dominate our lives. We're already seeing some very extreme weather events at 1 degree of climate change as we move forward. There's a lot we need to do to get prepared and to drive our emissions down. So hopefully that's 14 minutes and that's me done. So many thanks for listening. And as Tony mentioned at the start, we'll take questions at the end. So on to the next one. Thank you.
Malcolm, have you unmuted?
Right, let's go back. Michael, can you see and hear this? Okay. Okay. So this is about a specific project within the nature theme, the Soil Food Project. Think about how much soil there is in this, how much carbon there is in the soil already. There's absolutely loads, but there is room for a lot more. And basically we want to put more in there because it takes carbon dioxide out of the air. So there's less climate damage. There is always a balance between the amount of carbon in the soil and what's in the air. Now, we don't actually feed the soil itself. We feed the billions upon billions of soil creatures, microscopic creatures that are in it. And the more they live, the more they excrete and the more they die. And when they excrete and die, they fill the soil with more organic carbon and nutrients. So now this feed we make by fermenting, I have to say, unavoidable food waste. And the method is used by growers worldwide, though not less so in the UK. We are an action in the climate plan, and I'm reporting on 2 actions in that. Disseminate information. Well, we've published an introduction for households, and there's the link there, and we can put that up at the end of the session. And we were also asked to seek university research. Now, I'm happy to say that we found a great team of 2, Tom and Stuart at the university, to guide and assist us in our search through the literature. For now, at least, that is done. We are really pleased with what it's uncovered. It surprised us and deepened our understanding. So here's a few headlines. We found that the process is quite close to producing silage, which cattle feed. And that's great because silage is a huge industry. So we suddenly have access to all the knowledge, resources, and large-scale kit that implies. We also discovered, to our great surprise, that the acid produced in fermentation is not just a useful bit, a useful adjunct. It's actually central to everything. It stops food waste from decomposing immediately, and it converts into an ideal food for the soil microbes. Now, this has explained to us that, well, everything comes from the acid. The acid suppresses and kills all competing bacteria, and it suffuses the waste. Now, this explained lots of things that mystified us about the narrative that the companies selling stuff come out with. And because we now understand why it does what it does, it's important in guiding where we go to. Okay, now some numbers. Now, this is not saying that Reading Hydro is rubbish. This is one site. Reading's solar panels are 1,600 sites, so that's actually pretty good there. But this is the potential for carbon removal. This is Reading Hydro's own estimate, 59 tons of carbon a year. Reading solar panels in 2019. And this is a conservative estimate of what we could do from Reading's current food waste collections. So this is real. This is not pie in the sky. This is real food waste that's being collected. We know roughly how much carbon there is in food waste, and we've also reduced this by something called the carbon use efficiency, which is how much would end up in those dead bodies of soil creatures rather than being breathed out into the air. We found that the literature also suggested that soil management would give a higher efficiency. So that, about 15 hydros worth, suggests that it's worth giving that more investigation in the future. So the question is, what do we do next? And I think that we just need to answer the question, what is stopping us now? And we should approach that systematically, looking at all the obstacles and get around them. Now, these are the things that we think need attention right now. We don't have enough people working on it. What we found in the study meant that we can improve. We know how to improve the fermentation process. Most fermentation is done by people with kitchens producing soil food for their gardens. But if we're going to do this across the town, we're going to have to introduce transport from the one to the other. We're going to have to be able to scale up town-wide and get rid of some costs. It's also worth noting that soil food is both organic and it's a decent nitrogen replacement fertilizer. Not many of them around, should be able to make quite a bit of money for it. Okay, so my last question is, would anybody here like to join in? Or do they know anybody who might like to join in? There's room for people who are interested in any of these areas, the people who might be making food. And so you might be a supporter of a community garden, a member of a horticultural club, and so on and so forth. If you're at all interested, then email that address and just quote soil food, so we know it's about that. And here again is the link to making your own soil food. And whoops, don't want that, stop the share. Right, there you are, a very amateur presentation.
Yeah, Reading is really nice. Heathrow Airport, so I'd rather not go to Nottingham, but it's
Right, good evening. My name's Tricia Mokuse and I lead the Nature and Green Spaces Action Team. This includes a wide variety of actions over the 5 years. Some are investigative, and Malcolm's given you information in detail about the soil food one, and some are practical activities. And I'm not quite sure why I have a strange echo going on, but I'll just try and talk over it.
yeah.
Could be anybody, right?
Trish, Tony. Tony.
That's kind of how I hear it.
Tony.
So I'll put on the website in a minute, or do start the website while I'm explaining it.
Mute. Oh, that's it. Okay, Trish sorted him out. So.
We're good.
Yeah.
Right, let's go to slide 2. The majority of our actions are related to carbon storage to mitigate the impacts of greenhouse gas emissions. And then the rest of the actions are about trying to improve the habitats for biodiversity, both for the existing species in the town and also anything that might come in as the climate changes. And I'm just going to talk briefly about what has been done in the last 24 months. Next slide, please, Michael.
Oh.
First thing is changes to council mowing regimes. Now, many of you will have seen this across the town. They started changing the mowing regimes on about 30 different roadside verges and roundabouts during the summer of 2020, reviewed what was happening, got feedback from local people. On the whole, everyone said, this is great, carry on. A few people said, goodness, it looks absolutely disgusting. And there were some areas where actually trying to mow on a steep slope at the end of the season proved almost impossible for the workforce to do. But the numbers, a lot of the sites have been redone this year, more sites have come on. There's now 6 hectares of roadside verge and roundabouts under new mowing regime. Council has bought equipment that will collect the grass and therefore reduce the fertility of some of these areas over time, so that wildflowers will show more variety. And they've also put another 2 hectares of parks into a nature conservation mowing management practice rather than cutting it every 2 weeks. Wildflower seed has been planted on some of those areas. Others have been left to develop naturally. Next slide, please. No? Michael? Another slide? Any chance? Dead as a dono. I shall carry on rabbiting and the slides will catch up with me eventually. The other thing we've had as a main target is, here we are, reviewing management of Reading Borough Council lands. The target in the action plan is to review a minimum of 4 sites a year. And that doesn't sound very much, but by the time you've done a full review of exactly what's going on there at the moment, canvassed opinions from various interest groups on what they'd like to see in the future, written it all up, discussed it, it's a lot of work. Sarah Kopp has been the most amazing woman. She visited almost every RBC bit of land from parks to playgrounds, and he produced this huge matrix which identified exactly what they contained at the moment and where the opportunities were for improvement. She did full designs for 5 sites of these. And some of these have been improved by the council, other ideas have been rejected. I couldn't say I agree with the rejection reasons, but we are where we are. Ethical Reading have committed to doing some of the tree planting requirements on these sites. And as usual, the problem with implementation is not the volunteers to do the work, it's not the ideas, it's back to money. More sites have been reviewed with management proposals for this year. And the one that has been finalised, I would say, next slide please, Michael, is Clayfield Copse. So this year we've set up a self-guided walk through the 20-year-old secondary woodland there, which was previous pasture, and agreed a new area with Reading Borough Council for natural regeneration to begin to store more carbon. There'll be new planting along the Caversham Park Road fence line and a security bund to go to replace the rather revolting fence that there's at the moment. And that will be planted with native wildflowers. Got some replacement oaks into the car park. And we've been stymied because of money on a much needed all-weather path around the site, because whilst it's wonderful that so many people have used it over the COVID period, the truth is that now during the winter, the paths have widened and widened and widened, and there's an awful lot of stuff which is good quality conservation land, which is just getting trampled to death. And we would very much like a lot of the dog walkers to take one all-weather path round, get back into their cars and disappear again on a daily basis. I costed it out and it's £99,000. So it's not on the schedule at the moment. We may find a cheaper way of doing it. I hope so. Next slide, please. The other thing we've been doing is making improvements to green corridors, and I'm just going to show you 2. So at Maple Durham Playing Fields, there's been a new school put in, which has created havoc with arguments across Caversham of whether it should be here or there and why and how the kids are going to get there and the traffic. And it is a fairly hideous building. So we agreed with Reading Borough Council, they were going to plant 3 mature standard beeches, which will in 100 and 150 years will look absolutely magnificent, but at the moment look a little wimpish. And then we've planted about 100 saplings to make a tiny forest in the centre of these 3. And this will provide rapid growth to fill the area, shield the view of the school, provide food, shelter for wildlife. The surrounding area will go into the new mowing regime with just once a year mowing and the grass removed. And now the opposite side of the road will have the same mowing system with wildflowers planted. So that's a nice little one. And it fills up a gap, which unfortunately we shouldn't have had to do, but they knocked down 23 trees in order to build the school. So we're slightly ahead, but they were mature ones and mine aren't. Next slide of John doing some of the planting. The great, as you can see, the school is a site of total beauty. This would not have worked this summer had it not been for a couple of local residents who have assiduously watered these young saplings for us and kept them going. So we've got something like 95% take, which is pretty good. Next slide. I've done that one. Next one. Next slide. So another area we've been looking at is really forming a green link between the White Knights campus and Reading Old Cemetery. We did the monitoring at the cemetery and have provided some ideas for slight changes in management, not a lot. It's a well-managed site for conservation, carbon storage, wildlife at the moment. There's a new biological action plan group set up on Hamilton Road, with a number of residents interested in making a corridor effectively, including Hedgehog Highways, which is a new project from the university where the students are trying to make a network of hedgehog roads coming out from White Knights, where there's a good number of hedgehogs out into Early, out into central Reading. And this is an obvious one to try and connect up the cemetery area and Palmer Park with the university. We've been working with Redlands Primary School to green up the school playground and provide outdoor learning. Next slide, please. Michael. So in this in this area as well, this year Reading Borough Council changed the mowing regime in parts of Palmer Park and has sown wildflower seed to increase biodiversity, but unfortunately also losing land to the swimming pool development and extra car parking. Redlands Primary School parents have done an amazing job renovating the planting pockets within the school grounds and getting in new tree planting. And the Arcan volunteers rejuvenated the pond there. And we're taking the kids from the primary school out to collect tree seed in White Knights this autumn and grow on new stock, which can be used within the area. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next one. So if you could help, we would really love to have you. Would you be able to monitor one of the green routes through Reading, something near to your home or school or work? We need to identify places where the corridors need improvement. Could you suggest somewhere for more street trees that the Reading tree wardens would put in, or a new grass mowing regime for an area? Is there an area around you that could house a little mini forest? Tell us and we'll help make the changes, but we'd like you to help in too. And think about it at school, at work, and your community hub. We'd be very happy to help anywhere. And if you haven't got something specific in mind, but you'd like to be on the working thing, just email us and ask to be on the green theme list. And finally, you will all have seen about the Queen's Green Canopy, which is being started at the beginning of October, with a request to everyone to plant a tree. Well, I've got nothing against people planting trees, providing it's the right tree and put into the right place. So please, if you're thinking of planting a tree, do your research. Find out something that fits the space you have. We've provided 2 different fact sheets on the website, one about specifically planting trees in small gardens, and one which looks at a range of native trees and says, this is the height it's going to get to eventually. This is the soil conditions it would like. Do not read the label in the garden centre which tells you the height in 10 years' time. You're planting a tree for decades and hopefully centuries. So what it's going to be like in 10 years is of no interest whatsoever. You want the final size of the tree, so you don't have to cut it down in 20 years' time. Thank you. We now out for questions, I believe.
Thank you, Trish. So, do you have any questions? Chris has lost sound. I was going to say on the energy side, trying to retrofit a house is challenging and expensive and time consuming. Is one of the things I've learned from working on mine.
Can I
I have a hobby which is energy use reduction. I try to help myself and other people reduce their energy use. So that means things like insulation and draft proofing, turning things off, and remarkably also means don't waste so much food. So those are my kind of 3 or 4 basic ideas for this evening for how to reduce energy use.
The council has started a programme of retrofitting some of the council houses. And this is not my area of expertise, but it seems to me that you have to start on the larger scale sooner rather than later. There is very limited government funding to do this. The rough estimate for Reading, done about 3 years ago, was something like 3 billion quid to retrofit the existing housing stock. Luckily, we do have a local plan, unlike the rest of most of the rest of the country, which says new stuff has to be zero carbon, although it doesn't include the carbon embedded in the materials. But at least it's considerably better than standard. So things are happening, but whether or not they can happen fast enough, I think is inevitably going to require some money from outside Reading to put into the melting pot, or much cleverer ideas. Tony, do you know much about the proposed investment?
I think money is not really the biggest problem. I think deliverability is the biggest problem, people to do it and what to do. It's all that kind of, like, it's almost basic infrastructure and systems and who does it and where do they do it and who checks it. The money would be a lesser problem than the delivery. I think I'm really applaud Reading Council for getting on and starting doing stuff. It's a really good project they've got on the go. It's not easy either, because the way that things are measured and energy performance certificates and all that, they don't like heat pumps. They'd rather that you did something other than heat pumps. So all those systems were designed before heat pumps really became flavour for the month. So there's quite a bit of change to go on. I think fabric insulation for me is the main important thing, and that involves quite often planning changes. Like, please, can I change the look of the outside of my house so that it's insulated really well? And the planners say, sorry, no. I think there is a question in the thing that says what proportion of electricity is Reading Hydro send into Reading, and it's actually a very, very, very tiny proportion. It's equivalent to 90 homes, which is, it's almost insignificant, except for me, every little counts, and the educational value of Reading Hydro is enormous. We love having it, and it's raising the profile of renewable energy. It's accessible, it's doing loads of good things, and it's getting people thinking about energy. Like, everybody leaves it switched on when they should switch it off.
Tony, the other bit of the question there is who uses the energy the hydro produces?
Basically, the Lido have been really good to Reading Hydro, and they buy all the electricity that we can produce. If there's any left over, which is probably about 5%, it goes back to the national grid. But basically, they're going to use nearly all the electricity we produce, which is really good. And they're giving us a very good deal on it. And we're giving them a very good deal because they needed to use green electricity and we wanted to sell green electricity. So it's worked really well for both of us, but they are very good. And they are trying on the green front really hard, the Lido. They seem like a kind of all glass and stainless steel, but underlying, there's quite a good philosophy there.
And there's another question there from Anna. Are you working with schools to prepare the future generations of citizens? This, I think, this is to all of you.
Yeah.
And if yes, how effective is it?
Yeah, we've got an education program coming up. We'll have information and boards and stuff all around the hydro, but we'll be running school visits, adult group visits. And so we'll be encourage them. And we think the mule's really nice and it kind of helps children to engage, but we are planning to engage with future generations. You look at some stuff on our website and see that we're very keen to kind of inform them and enthuse them about renewable energy, and they can do projects on us, all sorts of good things. So yes.
I'm going to one of the schools in Reading, which I won't name, on next Tuesday to look at their fermentation of their catering waste.
Cool.
They've already bought some kit and they want some advice.
I already know what school that is then. Brilliant.
Can I add to that more generally? The Reading Climate Action Network has, and I cannot remember the name of the organisation that does this. It should be obvious to me, but there's a newsletter goes out to each school at the beginning of each term. The first one started at the beginning of 2021, and that is collecting together. It's aimed at primary schools. It's collecting together activities that can be done and are available through different sources, not necessarily just through Reading Climate Action. And also says we could give you additional help if you wanted in various areas. Now, of course, having strangers coming into the schools over the last academic year has not exactly been top of anyone's agenda, and all headmistresses and school staff have got plenty other things to worry about and trying to put all of their lessons online rather than just looking at us. But the offer is there for schools, and if anyone's got a school where they'd like more information to come in, we are available to help on that.
Trish.
Yeah. I was just going to say, sorry, I had to disappear. My my browser died, so hopefully I'm back. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's worth saying. Actually, I mean, schools are quite a good. I mean, they are the network of the new generation. So you know, it's so important to help educate our children in all of the various different themes that we've got in the Climate Action Network. But of course, they act as such an important social hub as well. As the children learn about it, the parents learn about it, their friends, relatives, and everything like that. So that's really important. The other things as well. I mean, a lot of school buildings are a bit crap when it comes to energy use and potentially water use and everything like that. So there's a good learning opportunity for as the schools learn how to improve their buildings to be better adapted to the changing climate, reducing their carbon footprints, water footprints, and everything like that. That's all very useful to share out to the wider community. It's similar as well to businesses. I mean, hopefully as an action network, we can help to get the message out to businesses, and they will form a natural social hub of getting that message out to the wider community. So hopefully we can build on, and get those messages across. But having some really good example things going on in the town, like Reading Hydro, like some of the really visible things that are going on with nature, is going to really help, hopefully.
Thank you, Chris. So if there's no more questions, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening, and thank Trish, Chris, Malcolm and Tony for their informative and interesting presentation. So thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Bye everyone.
Thank you.